Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Magic with Zuby. My name is Zuby, and if you're brand new to this show, the show is all about a little well-known card game called Magic: The Gathering. So on today's episode, we brought on Ashodin, aka the lead developer of Wayfarer. It is a new Magic: The Gathering format, a cooperative Magic: The Gathering format. Yes, you heard that right. It's played very similar to like role-playing a Magic game. And Ashodin can explain it way better than I can. And we went on an almost 2 hour talk discussing nothing but Wayfarers. So if you have a lot of questions on what it is and how to play it and all that, trust me, I feel like I asked every single question I could ask. And yeah, I'm definitely interested, for sure. Definitely interested in playing it. So I implore you, if you're interested, go and listen to the entire episode. It sounds like a lot of interesting stuff here, and look them up too, because there's got to be some gameplay videos out there. There's an introduction video that sort of showcases like how it gets played. But before we even get into that, let's get some announcements out of the way. You can help support the show on Patreon at patreon.com/magicwithzuby. You can find this podcast on every podcast platform out there. If there's one that we're not on, let me know, and I'll slap it on there. I mean, sheesh, I don't even know what podcast app we're not on. That could probably be a much smaller list than the apps we are on. You can also find me on Twitter at Magic with Zuby, on Instagram at magic_with_Zuby. You can find me on TikTok at mtgzuby. You can email me with any questions you may have at mtgzuby@gmail.com. And we are sponsored by cardsphere.com, the best place to buy, trade, and sell your Magic singles and sealed product. And we are also sponsored by Alter Sleeves. You can use coupon code MAGICWithZuby on checkout to help support the stream. And we are working on getting Patreon exclusive tokens, and we are going to be working on getting some Alter Sleeves, like custom Alter Sleeves for your decks as well. So without further ado, help me welcome Ashodin to the show, and let's learn about Wayfarer. All right, hey everybody, Zuby here, and I have with me Ashodin, I think you are the lead dev of Wayfarer, the sort of storytelling variant of EDH.
Yes, I am.
Oh, thank you for coming on. I brought you on because I know this whole Wayfarer, I'm going to try not to call it Wayfinder. I don't even know what Wayfinder is, but it just feels like it's going to slip off the tongue.
Right.
But Wayfarer I've seen this going around, and I watched one of your intro videos of it. It's sort of like how would you describe Wayfarer, actually? Let's start with you, because you're the one who designed this, or one of the people.
Yeah. So, as announced, of course, I am Ashodin, the lead developer of Wayfarer. And Wayfarer is basically, if you want to boil it down to the essence of what it is, it's story mode for Magic: The Gathering. So
Okay.
you could play it single player, you can play it multiplayer. We built it for 3 players playing with pre-constructed commander decks up against the main player that is the storyteller, essentially the dungeon master for the entire story, called the Scrivener.
Okay.
And it's very similar to Arch Enemy in that way.
Okay. So is it only meant for pre-con decks, or can you bring any EDH deck with you?
So
Or
with Wayfarer, when we first started developing it back in April, we wanted to target a specific kind of like base level for everybody to be able to play, and hitting those pre-constructed decks, I think, was probably the smartest idea, because anybody could just grab a deck off of, let's say, like a shelf at a local game store. If the person has the Scrivener deck for the Wayfarer games, they could just go right from there, right? That was the idea. And we tuned the entire content to go for that specific playstyle, where it's a lower power level in Commander, and you can definitely play with your own homebrew decks as well if you want to do it. Now, you can play with your higher power level decks if you want to as well, but you might just steamroll through the content if you do that. So
okay. So describe a little bit about like what the Scrivener is, and what kind of cards are involved with it, because a lot of them are custom made cards, right?
Yeah, so for the Scrivener themselves, and this is something that also limits the amount of difficulty in learning the format because we do have custom cards, but they're entirely for the Scrivener for the most part. The players that actually play with their commander decks, they really don't have to do anything else besides pick a specific new kind of card type that we're calling Spark Emblems, which give
Okay.
them special abilities. And so the Scrivener, of course, has their own custom cards, which are based on a specific story that we're trying to tell in Wayfarer's specific journeys, which is what we call our whole multi-episode storyline that we put out. And those, of course, give the challenge. They give the interesting plot points that the Wayfarers go through when they're playing against the Scrivener.
So you're talking a lot about a story, right?
Hmm.
And you know, obviously with the D&D set that just came out, it's sounding very similar to trying to run like a, you know, kind of offshoot D&D module, right? How do you describe, you know, someone who's just coming in hearing about this and, you know, it sounds interesting, but how would you describe, like, what do you mean exactly by a story per se? Like, because when I think of magic, it's just, all right, we'll turn people sideways and just attack and win, you know?
So with Wayfarer, we wanted to have, and this is something that has been really resonant with the community as we continue to, develop it, is that there just doesn't seem to be a kind of way to role play a little bit while you're playing with the cards. Now, the cards themselves are kind of built for a competitive play where you're usually playing against one other person, or if you're playing in a commander pod, you're playing against three other people. And there's some kind of flavor there, but we kind of wanted to take it further, where, of course, you're now playing with a group of people that are going together in a story, and they're having the cards themselves have more to do with the flavor text. We have prompts for the Scrivener that they can read before every scene, which is a big part of Wayfarer's design in general, is that we have a new card type called scenes, which actually set the gameplay up for the players, but also give that crucial plot point of why are you here? What is going on? How can you progress past this problem that's in front of you? And then, of course, unlock more story by doing so, get to the next scene, and continue on with the overarching plot that's going on with what you're playing in.
So describe like a problem if you can, like give a little scenario of, you know, I sit down and I play, and what am I going up against? Because like I said, I think for most Magic players it's going to be a little bit hard. Obviously the video you did is very good, but
Mm-hmm.
for people watching and listening to this, they're going to be like, what do you mean by story, right? Because it's just
Right.
because it just off the bat, it's sounding very reminiscent of oh god, what's that one little commander variant? Horde mode, I think it's called.
Yes.
Where you have, like, you know, a bunch of tokens and stuff, and it's essentially arch enemy. You have the one person playing this giant token deck, and you got to beat them and all that
Right.
stuff. And so, what is it that people are doing exactly?
Okay. So, yeah, like I said, after they have their commander decks and they start off and they're given the story, the scene cards, of course, give them a kind of puzzle. That's the gameplay that they're going to be going through. Is they start off, they play the game as normal. They play their lands, they play their spells, their
Hmm.
creatures, but the scene gives them a little bit of a puzzle they have to get through. So, for example, and just to give an example, like you asked for, the very first episode of our first content, which is based on Arcavios, where Strixhaven School of Mages is, the very first episode is you have to get to Strixhaven, and the first scene shows up with a bunch of the beacons that people may remember reading about in the Magic story and things like that. And we like to expand on those concepts with our scenes that we have in Wayfair. So that gameplay shows up where three beacons show up, and one of them is only the real beacon that will guide you to Strixhaven. You have to figure out which one it is. So these beacons have specific counters on them. The players have to knock those counters off and figure out which of those beacons is real. And then once they do, they can progress to the next plot point, which is quite interesting because uh, after they figure out which beacon it is, they actually blow it up by mistake, and now they're on fire. And that's another problem they have to solve in the next scene.
Okay. Okay, so is it still, just describing these beacons thing, is it still like your creatures are attacking it?
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
okay.
Exactly. Yeah. So in the scene now, of course, this is a little bit difficult without actual physical aid, like an image
Yeah.
to show you. So I'll try to describe it more so without that, where there's a scene card and the card itself sits in the commander zone,
Mhm.
the command zone, sorry, and that card will say, okay, if you attack these beacons, or sorry, if you attack the Scrivener, you may instead deal combat damage to these beacons, or sorry, or like remove counters from the beacons. And
Okay.
then, of course, removing the counters will make the beacon get sacrificed if it has no counter on it. And then you'll get something will happen depending on if the beacon was the correct one or not. And that's always kind of chosen at random at the beginning of the game. Like
Okay.
choose which one, as a secret, that type of mechanic.
So is there any kind of actual role-playing mechanics involved in this?
Yeah, we actually encourage, and this is kind of left up to the playgroup, and this is something that we kind of leave open-ended because we don't want to force anybody to play the game in a way where they have to come up with a bunch of role-playing mechanics.
Yeah.
Because some people, when they play Dungeons and Dragons, some people just really like the combat, or some
Oh
people
yeah,
really
I've got
just
some
like
of
the
those
role-playing.
players. Yep.
So we leave that open-ended, but we do give prompts. We do give guides for what is going on. The flavor text is very rich. Like it's one of our most important parts of Wayfarer. We try to put as much flavor text as we can as possible to give connotations for what's going on. The seeds themselves, the scene cards, have little flavor text prompts on them, and they're totally new cards. And to describe it to people listening, it's a card that's turned sideways that has a big rules text box for what's going on, gives you the like the objectives you have to do for that scene, and then there's
Yeah.
like a really nice image of the art, and then it has like cool flavor text on it as well. So it's very exciting. It's very different, and everybody that we've had playtesting and playing it has said that they really do feel like they're more involved in a role-playing way, even if they're not actually role-playing, but
Yeah.
just because everything else has the trappings now that makes it feel like they're on an adventure.
Okay, interesting. Interesting. The other question I have on just more rules based here. It's so going from the player's perspective, you mentioned,
Mhm.
recommending a precon, you can do homebrew. Is it you still have 40 life? Is it still essentially basically the same rules as commander? Is there a ban list, anything like that?
Yes, so to speak on the ban list, we actually do take our ban list from the regular Commander Rules Committee. So whatever they decide that gets banned there is also banned in Wayfarer. So of course they did recently ban Hull Breacher, and that
Mm-hmm.
of course is banned here. And that could have been a problem with Wayfarer because stopping the Scrivener, who is of course the storyteller, from drawing cards would actually make it very difficult for the Scrivener to even give a challenge. So that is
Yeah,
that is something
yeah.
that we definitely followed up with there. But to speak more about changes in life total and things like that, we have modified the life totals, and this is of course because the way that a Wayfarer journey progresses, it's much different from just any regular Commander game. So week to week, you can play all the different episodes in a Wayfarer journey, all the way to the ending that we have prepared. And so we start off with episode one with the players having 30 life instead of 40 life. And the Scrivener themselves will have variable amounts of life depending on how the scenes are set up. So sometimes scenes may make it so that the Wayfarers can't attack the Scrivener as easily. So maybe the Scrivener doesn't need as much health and they can start off with 10 or 15 or what have you.
Okay.
But yeah, so then from there, from 30 at episode one, which is what we call tier one as well, because we have different tiers of content, and that just lets you know what level your spark emblem should be, how powerful the Scrivener is going to be. It gives you kind of like a difficulty challenge
Okay.
rating to it, kind of like Dungeons and Dragons. And so going from each tier, which all goes up to tier 5, from tier 1 to tier 5, you start with 30 life, then you go 35, 40, 45, 50 at maximum.
Okay. And is this a sort of thing where you have to start at tier one, or can you start anywhere you want?
Hmm. That is a very good question. That I have not been asked that question before, so thank you. You could theoretically start at any tier. So, and this is something that we've actually discussed before as well, in terms of can other players join in the middle of a campaign, as it were, for Wayfarer? And yes, you can. You just would have to adhere to whatever is going on at the time, which, of course, you choose your spark emblem. You have to change your deck based on what the tier is, because as the tiers go forward, your deck actually gets smaller and smaller. So it becomes more
Oh, okay.
streamlined as the episode goes on. We shorten the deck down from 100 cards at tier 1, regular old commander gameplay, down to 60 cards at maximum at tier 5. So it becomes akin to like a brawl deck where it's very streamlined. You get all the cards you need to do all your combos and things like that, and just becomes really kind of exciting. Gives that kind of level up feel to your
Okay.
deck as well.
So why the change in the deck size?
We wanted it to have a kind of experience where it feels like you're progressing as a character in the
Hmm.
storyline. So you're gaining power by taking out the cards that maybe are redundant from your pre-constructed deck, because as before, we built 4 pre-constructed decks, and they're not as optimized. That's why you see tons of guides out there always when new ones come out saying like, here,
Yeah.
add these new things to your deck. And we have a whole system where you take out cards and you put new cards in, so you can put in extra cards that maybe fit with your commander or work better. And as you get closer to 60, you'll start to realize, oh, these cards start to make all my combos come together, or they work better with the spark emblem as it levels up, because it also levels up as you continue to progress through the journey.
Is it worth? Just thinking as a commander player, is it worth reducing your deck size as you go up tiers? Can you theoretically keep your 100 card deck if you wanted to, or?
You definitely could. I don't think that's a hard and fast rule for us where you have to go down by cards, but I do think that just to give you the best chance to fight against the difficulty of what we have prepared, we recommend doing that because, of course, like I said before, the streamlining helps out with drawing the right cards you need.
Okay. Okay, interesting. And when you're taking out cards, I mean, just I'm assuming it's still the same deck building restrictions, right? One
Yes,
of each
correct.
card has to be in your commander colors.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah. So we have 2 different methods for upgrading your deck. The first method we're still kind of working on because we have a bunch of like tech people that are in our development group, and they're putting together like a website to basically booster draft new cards for your deck, which is a very interesting way
Interesting.
how to create your deck. So essentially, what we've done is we've ret retooled EDH Rec's website so that it pulls cards that it recommends from
Mm-hmm.
a made page and then creates a booster pack from those
Oh,
cards. And then you
interesting.
use those cards to upgrade your deck. Now you can, of course, if you have them in your collection, you can use those. You can proxy them. It's a casual format, so we don't have to really enforce too much.
Yeah.
Then we have a no draft guide, which we have up on our website, mtgwayfarer.medium.com, that has just a kind of a guide to like, okay, this is what you do if we don't have the booster thing up, or if there's just you don't have anything around. Like this is your guide how to do that, and it's pretty simple where you just take the cards out and then put the cards, as you feel fit the deck. So.
So is it recommended to have a sort of sideboard, perhaps, for decks? Like say you have just your pre-con Wayfarer deck,
Hmm.
and I don't know. Is that been a thought at all, or?
I don't really think there's a need for a sideboard or anything like that. So if a general person picks up the pre-constructed deck, they can of course see like the recommendations on the EDH Rec website, or I encourage them to talk with their play group that are also playing Wayfarer if they're playing with multiple people to figure out what to put into their deck as well. Just kind of get that sort of camaraderie going where people are just talking and figuring how things worked out together for their group.
Okay. Okay. And another question I have, so let's say, you go through tier 1 through tier 5, you beat this campaign. Um how how much replay value have you seen at it, just all the play testing from going from tier 1 to tier 5 and then wanting to do it again? Do a lot of people see the value of that, or is it because you sort of know what happens, it's kind of like you get bored?
So one of the biggest replay values that comes with Wayfarer is, of course, you can play with an entirely different commander deck through the content. And our first release, which is Arcavios Schools Out Forever, has a basic storyline that is pretty linear, where you just play through it all and then you're finished. Now, different things can, of course, happen as you're playing through it. The RNG is still there. You may not even see specific cards that the Scrivener might get during their gameplay that you may see on another run through.
I see.
And
Okay.
one of our biggest mechanics that encourages replayability is, of course, our spark emblems, which are specific cards that we've created that give you special abilities that enhance the role playing, that you are a planeswalker, that you have these special powers regardless of whatever color identity that your commander is. You could have, for example, like a black red deck that has a spark emblem that's based on life gain, and maybe there's some life gain stuff that you would want to do with that would help out with the black red deck that uses a lot of life for special abilities and things
That's
like that.
interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So I feel like we've talked a lot about the player side here.
Sure.
Let's get into a little bit about the Scrivener, aka the DM here. So describe what a Scrivener would exactly do, what they would need to be prepared with. How many cards are in a deck, something like that.
Okay. Yeah, so for the Scrivener's side, we have built, of course, our own custom cards that go inside those decks. So the cool thing about it is we actually started with, when we first did the development, was the Scrivener had its own commander style deck, which it was 100 cards. And we had the different scenes, and it was kind of not working as well as we kept progressing through the scenes because all the cards weren't really themed to the scene, as it were. Like, there were some cards that were themed, but they would just kind of all show up in a jumble. And so what we did was we actually broke that commander deck out into 4 different sections, because we have 4 scenes in an episode. And now each different scene has its own initial deck that's part of that 100 card deck. So when you take that, you just pop it apart and put each different scene deck to go with each different scene. And they're usually a mix of our custom cards and actual cards that are from whatever set that we're using with. So, for example, in the Arcavios one, we have a bunch of Strixhaven School of Mages cards that
Oh,
are in there,
okay.
commons and uncommons, or stuff from like the commander decks that are also in there as well. And that's mixed in with our custom cards, so that way you get kind of a very thematic feel of, okay, I'm definitely here on this plane with my Wayfarers. There's definitely stuff going on that shows off that maybe I'm like in the woods. There's a bunch of like woodland
Yeah.
creatures and things like that. So we built it like that for them.
Okay, so when you're designing these decks for each scene, does the Scrivener, is there like a deck list that Scrivener should follow? Like if they
Yes.
go to your website? Okay.
Yes. To explain, every time we do a release, we give out the images for all the custom cards, so that way people can print them out if they need to. We're working on having a Patreon set up after we're finished with the Arcavios episode 5, which is very close to completion. So that way people can subscribe to that, and that will allow us to send them printed Scrivener custom cards, which is, of
Yeah.
course, something that we've been asked about quite a lot. And yeah, so you'll have those cards mixed in with the regular cards, and you'll be able to use those to battle against the Wayfarers with.
Okay. And how many cards are in each scene for the Scrivener
Yes.
deck?
Oh, right. Yes. Also, you were also apologies. You were also talking about the card list. So
Yes.
yeah, uh, we have, in addition to those card images that are given out, we have an episode guide, and this guide gives you all the cards that go into every different scene deck. so that way you know exactly what it's supposed to be consistent of, and then you'll be able to figure out what regular Strixhaven cards go in that as well. So that way you're absolutely sure to know, in scene one there's 15 cards, right? And maybe 8 of them are our custom cards, and 7 of them are Strixhaven cards, and you shuffle that up together, and then you just play from there. So, and
Okay.
they'll have a guide for, I think, like I said, it's 100, so it's like, I think it's 20. Yeah, no, it's 20 in scene one, 25 in scene two, 25 in scene three, and 30 in scene four for a total of 100 total.
Okay. And do Scriveners follow the same kind of rules as Magic players? Do they have to play lands, or can they play? Do they play their spells for free, or how does that work?
So this is where we get into the crux of it, which is we changed a lot of the rules here for the Scrivener themselves, because just like you mentioned earlier, we do want to have kind of a horde mode to it where things are kind of played a little bit automatically, which gives the Scrivener more chance to focus on the role playing of what's going on during the entire story. So the Scrivener's turn is a little bit different from a regular player's turn. They start their turn by untapping. If the scene changed, that would actually happen before their untapping. And then they would go to their upkeep, they'd go to their draw step. They wouldn't draw any cards. This actually is changed because of how the Scrivener does things, which is when they get to their main phase, they can actually cast cards for free from their hand, equal to the amount of Wayfarers that are in the game. So if there are 2 Wayfarers, they can cast 2 cards from their hand. And their hand size changes based on how many Wayfarers are in the game as well. So for 2 Wayfarers, they would have a 3-card hand size.
Okay.
And this is relevant later because after they've cast their cards for free, they've done their attacks for their turn, done their other stuff that they wanted to, they go to their end step, and then they draw back up to their hand size. So if they've used all their cards in their
Okay.
hand, they go back up to 3 cards. And
Okay.
going back to just one more thing, going
Sure.
back to your lands question. So we've created a system in there that helps the Scrivener kind of catch up to the Commander's player's power, the Wayfarer's power, because during some Commander games, people can snowball, right?
Oh
And we
yeah.
built a kind of catch-up mechanic for the Scrivener that's called Infuse. That's tied to the lands they play because they don't normally play lands out of their deck. They create a specific Essence land that allows them to do this mechanic with.
Okay. Interesting. What is this essence land?
Ooh, okay. So an Essence land is a land that lets the Scrivener tap for any color of mana. That it doesn't allow them to create colorless, so they'll have to do it some other way through artifacts or something like that, which of course will build into the Scrivener's deck as well if need be. But this allows them to cast anything from their hand in addition to whatever they casted for free that turn. But they only put 1 land onto the battlefield every turn, so it's kind of Hearthstone-y, where you're just
Okay.
generating mana every turn. And then once they get to 3 essence lands on the battlefield, they can use 3 of those, tap those lands, not for mana, but to infuse either a permanent or a sorcery, maybe something they had casted for free that turn. And infuse is a mechanic that is quoted on a card that will essentially supercharge that card for the turn. So its base effects that gives to every single card, regardless if it's custom or not, will make it haste and uncounterable, which is very strong already. But then if it's say one of our custom cards for Wayfarer, maybe it'll have extra effects, like maybe it'll copy itself and you'll have 2 of
Okay.
those, or maybe the creature will get +3 and trample, and that might be a problem that the Wayfarers would have to deal that turn.
Interesting. Interesting. So if I'm understanding correctly, the Scrivener can cast 2 cards for free. They can still cast more cards if they have the mana for it.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
So, yeah, and this also encourages the Wayfarers to not have to hold on to board wipes or other specific removal in their hand, which typically can happen in a regular Commander game. And
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the problems we wanted to solve with Wayfarers, making sure that the cards that the Wayfarers had in their hands weren't just useless and sitting there.
Interesting. Interesting. No, I like that idea. The one other thing, turn order. Um, how does the turn order go? Is it the three Wayfarers go at the same time and then the
Yes.
Scrivener? Okay.
Yes. So it works exactly like our arch enemy, where everybody on the Wayfarer side takes their turn at the same time. So they all untap, they all upkeep, they all draw, and they all main phase. You
Okay.
know,
And then Scrivener has their own turn when they go.
correct.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. So I guess one of my biggest questions is, how did this come to be? Like what was the sort of brainchild of this?
So back during April, which is where a lot of this brainstorming happened before, really throwing all of ourselves into the development, there was just a conversation had in my personal friend server. That's we mostly talk about Magic the Gathering there, and one of the things that we were kind of looking at was just like, wow, there's just no kind of way for people to play cooperatively in Magic the Gathering. Like there is kind of a way with Arch Enemy with Horde
Yeah.
Magic that's
Yeah.
I mean, like, but it's not really developed in a way where it's been really kind of put a lot of effort behind it. And there's so many more cards now in Magic the Gathering that can be used to play with this, and especially with the pre-constructed commanders that continue to come out, that just creates a party of players right there that can just start off and go from there. And one of the other things that we thought of that would make it really good to develop is it's actually extremely fun content to watch. It's kind of akin to watching a Dungeons and Dragons game, and we've been doing this weekly on our Twitch stream, which is twitch.tv/the Wayfarer Guild. And we've been having a playthrough of the different episodes that we've released. And every single time, people have been showing up and saying, like, I don't no idea what's going on, but this is incredible entertainment to watch. And, that's just a kind of a good sign knowing that, what
Yeah.
we developed is just really kind of interesting and fun. And that's another reason why we wanted to build it, is we wanted to have a kind of entertainment for Magic the Gathering that is not available anywhere else.
So is the goal for Wayfarer to stay in Magic the Gathering? Is it the goal to just be its own separate format? Because it almost sounds like this could be like just hearing it just off the top of my head, it almost sounds like you could almost spin this off to an entirely different card game if you wanted to.
We could, yes. And this is actually a question that has been asked by some other people, is like, you could just make this your own game, but there's kind of a merit there in pushing for something that is not available in Magic the Gathering, and just kind of making it aware that there's this whole other group of people, and it's a vast amount of people. And my girlfriend is actually one of these, where they are very intimidated playing Magic the Gathering because they're not really competitive, or if they are competitive, they're just kind of scared to be able to get into that competitive mode, and maybe losing is really hard on them or something like that. So offering a way to play together, which is something that Magic doesn't even really support officially, is, I think, hitting that niche that I really believe that a lot of players are really excited for. And we've grown initially from just 2 months ago to over like close to 2,000 followers on Twitter, and just a whole bunch of interest elsewhere on social media, that I really do think that we're striking a very specific spot that people want in Magic the Gathering.
Okay. No, I can definitely see that. There's definitely merit to that. I was just curious if there's been any talk about spinning this off into its own thing, and would that even be a future for it too?
Well, I definitely think that, after we've put together, a lot of different Wayfarer content and stuff like that, it might be possible to release our own separate game from there. Uh, I do think that, for me personally, and I'm, the one that drives a lot of the development and just kind of awareness of the format, because, I'm just really, really what is it? I've got a lot of plans, and I just really think that once we reach a specific level with Wayfarer of awareness, where I've got specific goals and thresholds I want to hit with Wayfarer, and especially, like Wizards of the Coast, when Tiny Leaders was a thing.
For
Wizards
the
of the
few
Coast,
months.
right, for a few months, Wizards of the Coast actually was actively designing cards for Tiny Leaders. They came out and said, yeah, we created like a card from I think it was what was it? Conspiracy. I think Leovold, I believe, was made for tiny leaders as opposed to commander. And
Interesting.
I think that the longer that we remain out there and showing people that, this is a thing that we want to have happen in Magic, I want to get to the point where Wizards of the Coast acknowledges that, there is a market for appealing to people who want to play cooperatively, and knowing that there's a way to do that. And, for me personally, if we reach that point where they're starting to develop cards for Wayfarer, that is the point where I feel like the format itself is, good enough that, we can make our own game from there if people want to have something that's maybe not in Magic the Gathering, to do our own thing and what have you. But yeah,
So
I'm ambitious.
well, yeah, no, and it's fine to have that. It's I like that, but the thing that I start to think about is, we've seen a lot of these flash in the pan formats here,
Sure.
and you guys just getting off your feet, for the past couple months. It's the thing that seems really ambitious about it is just all the custom cards, right?
Mhm.
That seems like a lot of work, like a lot of balancing there. How do you, like, is the plan to make new scenes or new tiers, or I'm sorry if I'm messing up the verbiage here,
No, you're
for,
you're
for
entirely
for
fine.
for each new set to come out? Like, is there a plan to do an AFR one? Is there a plan to do a Zendikar one, or is it just one of those, all right, we finished Strixhaven, now we're gonna do a Ravnica one now, or something like that? Or
So, just to give you a quick backdrop, we started with 3 people back in April, and we've actually expanded the team to, I think now it's close to 10. We have
for the development team?
yes, for the
Okay.
development team. So we've brought on a writer, we brought on 3 extra card designers, we've brought on extra rules people as well to make sure that our rules are up to snuff. And yeah, we want to continue supporting Wayfair with every single premier set that Wizards releases. So, with Adventures in the Forgotten Realms, we actually just announced last week that uh, our specific journey after Arcavios for Strixhaven School of Mages is Waterdeep, Remnants of a Fate. And
Okay.
we're working on that content right now as we speak, getting the story set up for that and getting all the characters and things. And we've done the research on Dungeons and Dragons. We've got crisscrossing with the commanders from Adventures in the Forgotten Realms, with the adventuring party that's in the actual main set that's going on with that story, in addition to our own Wayfarer story. And even from there, we've already done uh, kind of some looks at Innistrad as well, some beginning work on the Innistrad Wayfarer stuff. And I'm really excited on that one too, because we've actually contacted some artists who want to do specific Wayfarer only art for our cards for that
Oh,
set,
that's
and that is
cool.
extremely exciting.
Oh, that's really cool. Okay, that's interesting. Do you all so how much of the time, like, because that seems like that takes up a lot of time, and you have a team of 10 people, which is good. Like, do you have a dedicated person that tries to get more people involved with it? Because that's going to be the biggest thing, from what I can tell, is just getting it out there, getting people more aware, getting people to try it first of all. Because as soon as, because just my first reaction to it when I saw it, like, oh cool, you can play commander deck, then I saw these custom cards, I'm like, oh wait, I don't understand. I can't, like, I don't get it. But the way you're describing it, and then that intro video, it makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
The thing that I worry about is it just seems like there's a huge learning curve for it.
Okay, so to address this, and this of course has been asked multiple times by other people as well, especially in our own Discord server, which is the learning curve. How does that work? How do we get people into the game? Well, for our team itself, we've actually brought on a social media manager. So this person has been going through and helping us figuring out how to get the word out there with giveaways, contests, and things like that. But on the learning curve itself, we've put out that video that you've watched to give an idea of how things work. We have, in addition to that, front loaded all of the decision making and the design work on the Scrivener itself. So the only person who has to learn all of the mechanics, or just basically how the game works itself, is just the Scrivener, which is
So just like
perfect.
D&D.
Exactly. Just like the Dungeon Master. Exactly. And
Yep.
that actually has been a huge boon to the game itself, because if only one person has to learn how the game has to work, the other three people potentially that are playing the game only have to show up with the commander decks and just start playing. And an additional tool that we have as well to go along to help people to play Wayfarer is we have a tabletop simulator mod on Steam that has all of our episodes released thus far, and you can go in there, check out all the cards yourself, see what's going on with that. You can take our guides and figure out how to play the game, even single player if you want to, through that.
That's interesting. No, I saw that. I saw the tabletop simulator thing. I've been friends of mine have been telling me for years to buy it. I've been so lazy. It's no, but that's interesting. I like that. It does make sense where, similar to D&D, the DM has to almost know everything, but it seems like the Scrivener, it does seem pretty interesting that the actual players, the Wayfarers themselves, are just like show up with a deck and that's it. You don't need to know anything else except, maybe reading the card on what it does. You don't need to
Right.
know any extra rules.
Right. Yeah,
For
and that's particularly why we also have a lot of people in our development team that are very good at rules templating. So that way people that are used to the way Wizards of the Coast do their rules, our cards will read exactly how you think they should. So specific abilities will work the way that you normally expect them to. We don't try to do anything that's super crazy, but we will try things, here as we see fit, depending on if the content wants it. So for example, like in our upcoming Waterdeep journey, we've got this really cool spark emblem, which is like I said before, it's the cool thing you pick for your commander
hmm
that actually mimics the classes that are in Adventures in the Forgotten Realms. And one of the classes that we've kind of built up is the barbarian, and the barbarian has a special ability on its spark emblem that puts out a new type of card that hasn't been done yet, but I'm sure will be done soon, which is actually a saga aura that puts itself on one of your creatures, and every single turn that saga ticks up, it applies a new ability to the creature that it's enchanted. And we kind of, we play around with things like that. We give kind of more of an excitement that and fleshing out of the set that maybe might take 3 to 4 to 5 years for Wizards of the Coast to come back to.
No, I like that idea of a saga, or I mean, we already saw a saga land. I mean, it's only bound to happen. That's been one of my new favorite mechanics, or just new favorite card designs in the past couple of years. Sagas have been so good.
Yeah, yeah. And it comes from the mind of Richard Garfield, so it's going to be good.
Yeah, no, and especially even the new class cards are really fun too. No, that's awesome though. I like that. So, do you all see yourselves ever diverging from the commander ban list? Do you see any reason you would need to or have to?
So as the game continues to grow and we get more feedback and more playtesting and things like that go on with it, we're going to always keep an eye on things that maybe slow down the Scrivener too much, stop the Scrivener, or things that are kind of difficult that come in from other people's decks. Now, granted, setting it up for the pre-constructed decks makes it easier because we know exactly what are in those decks,
Mm-hmm.
and what people upgrade into from those decks are typically not going to be too broken. So we anticipate that if people are trying to play the way the format is built, that we won't have too many problems. But if we have to ban certain things like Atraxa being too crazy, we'll get rid of that.
Oh yeah,
Or
because she
things
was
like that.
a precon. That's right.
Correct. Yeah. So, and we keep our
And
eyes on that.
and is there any? What about Cyclonic Rift? Does that
Cyclonic Rift is
seem
actually
too
not
good?
too bad. Yeah, it's
Okay.
not too bad. Now, Cyclonic Rift, of course, only brings back opponent stuff, so it's not as good in a cooperative setting as it is with competitive. And that's another bonus to Wayfarer, is that other things you might want to put into your deck that are more beneficial for cooperative. For example, like some of the Battle Bond teammate stuff actually works extremely well in
Or
Wayfarer
the
because
the battle for Zendikar one too, the Oath of the
correct.
Gatewatch.
Surge, yes, the surge mechanic.
Yeah,
Yeah. So that sort of stuff that is kind of set more by the wayside by Wizards of the Coast because they don't have a format that it really fits into, we can put it into Wayfarer. I'm also thinking about the assist stuff that's in
yeah,
Battle Bond, where another player
yeah,
can
that one
pay
too. Yep.
mana for. Yeah. So that actually helps. And we kind of take those designs and we put them on our own Wayfarer cards where we have clauses that say other wayfarers can help you pay for this ability, right? So you can help a person pay for a specific cost or help each other get extra health or mana or something like that, depending on what the cards allow you to do.
Interesting. I like that. I like that. Do you all have a sort of timeline for how you are wanting, or like I guess like a timeline of growth and where you sort of see yourself at a year from now, 5 years from now, you know, sort of like goals that you all have set.
Yeah, we definitely have goals that we're looking forward to doing. This year is mainly just about getting the content out there, building up a library of stuff that people can access to say, okay, there's definitely development going on here and things that, I want to be sure to play and it's supported, right? Because there have been a lot of attempts at this kind of play style before that just kind of peter out in their types of gameplay. And I think one of the biggest things that helps us continue building new stuff for Wayfarer is by tying ourselves to every premiere release. So, as going forward, Wizards of the Coast is going to release commander decks for every major standard set as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to their planeswalker decks. And that gives us an in every single time by having a content release that goes alongside it. You want to go play Wayfarer with the new commander decks that have just come out in Innistrad? Yeah, go ahead and take those and jump right into our release. That happens there. Play with your friends cooperatively and get maybe like another side of the story that hasn't been really explored yet through whatever they're doing for that story there, right?
Interesting. With in-store play starting to open up, and hopefully next year with tournaments coming back, do you all have plans to sort of travel at all a little bit, or like try to get the game out there? Because getting it all online is one thing, but word of mouth at a tournament would be really beneficial too.
Right. So that's actually another thing that we have done a lot of research on and a lot of preparation for. So of course the Patreon will help us by people subscribing to that to give us more capital to be able to put into physical copies of the cards. I myself am going to put in a portion of my own to make sure that I have enough of the printed materials for people. And specifically myself, I don't know if the rest of the team has the ability to do this, and I will of course check with them as paper play opens up. But we do want to have a presence at, say, Magic Fests or big tournament places or things like that, where we'll have essentially like a big banner area for people to come over and look and see what Wayfarer is. Maybe we'll try to get some of the like the event spaces that are available inside of the hall there, where you can have a specific events that are going on where you can show off Wayfarer episodes to people that want to watch the entertainment and maybe come up afterward and talk to us about what they thought about it and things like that.
Interesting. I like that. It's yeah. I guess if it goes back to the way, let's say, Channel Fireball runs it again, right? I mean, you'd have the vendor booths and then
Right.
the artist alley way. I mean, depending on how big it is, Channel Fireball may let you use a table or something, but it would definitely be something you'd want to work with their event staff.
Correct. Yeah.
They're also hopefully if they do come back, their event staff is a lot better than their old stuff. Not that they were bad; they were just what's the
It
right
could be
word?
better, I guess maybe.
I guess lack of communication was the biggest thing with them.
Yeah, yeah, and I can understand that, and that I think is just it might be just entirely possible that there are specific people that they want to work with, and maybe they just don't have the time to look at everybody, which is understandable. You
Oh
want to
yeah.
be able to bring things there that will bring people in, of course, and make it, financially viable for them, right? And the different convention halls that I've been to, there's always been a very large space for people to just congregate and do what they want, in addition to the own event tables and things like that. And we've got plans for those specific events where the way that Wayfarer is built, we can build specific challenges that people can be like timed to go through, or for example, one of the things that we want to build for the Forgotten Realms release that we have is like an endless dungeon where you kind of go through it roguelike style over and over until you get to a specific floor. And then maybe
That'd
like
be
if that
cool.
was in an event setting, you'd be able to record what floor you got to and you'd get a prize from it or something.
That'd be pretty cool. That's almost like the old school D&D where people used to, what is it, go to Gen Con, and they
Mhm.
they'd race to see who could get through a certain dungeon the quickest
Right.
and all
Right.
that. And
Exactly.
that sounds pretty similar. That'd be pretty fun, I think.
Yeah, yeah. That's like just kind of a sample of the ideas that we have in place for events to create excitement for Wayfair. And we can do things where we're like giving away packs of whatever were the releases at the time, or things like that, and just building a community where people want to play together in the same space that people are playing against each other. And I feel there's room for both.
That's awesome. That's awesome. How's your community in Discord right now? Do you have a lot of active players right now?
We've got a lot of people that are doing playtesting. Right now, we've got a lot of other people that are also assisting us with spreading the word, helping us with the rules templating if maybe we like missed something, like kind of a card post that we did or things like that. And we always try to make sure to keep that stuff up to date before we release like the final version of it. So yeah, it's been going pretty well. We've got a lot of interaction on our other social media as well, and we're always looking forward to talking with anybody in our Discord.
Awesome. Awesome. So I heard through the grapevine from a certain card sphere owner that you are working on trying to get a Wayfarer thing going on with us over at Card
Yeah,
Sphere.
yeah, actually, we're always looking for opportunities to work with various, sponsors and or other people that want to, make content with us. We've got, Shivam from Gear Per Gears, like
Mm-hmm.
he wants to do a Wayfarer episode with us at some point, and I really think the concept is so interesting to other people that have more of a flavor interest in Magic the Gathering that I really think we're going to be able to reach that sort of level where people are just really interested in it. And going back to your comment about Cardsphere, yeah, we've got ideas about putting some articles up on the website, maybe doing
I've
some
heard.
content.
I've heard.
Yeah.
I've heard. And I've expressed my interest to a certain Ted. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. I mean, it would be great to do, like a Wafer episode with, either you or Pixie Kitten, I
Mm-hmm.
believe would be great as well. And the best part about it is you really only have to show up with the commander decks. I've had, the other people that have played with us on Twitch, they really, all they have to do is pick their Spark emblem. Like some of my other players, just, they just print it out and there you
Yeah.
go. That's all they have to do. And they're ready to play. And I use the when we do that over spell table, actually, which is quite interesting, is I connect my tabletop simulator mod to spell table so people can see the cards up close. They don't have to
Oh,
worry
nice.
about, yeah,
Nice.
like the custom cards not showing up on the reader. I can show all that stuff full screen, full text, everything.
Nice. Nice. So when we do this, should can I bring my Grand Arbiter deck and just counter everything? My Grand Arbiter control has
That
barely any creatures and just approach to the second sun.
we had one of our developers that are in our team now, who's Coach J-Ro on Twitter,
Mm-hmm.
Unsummoned Skull. He was one of our playtesters when we first did, I think it was episode 2 playtesting, and he brought in with another player just an entirely built commander deck that was all about infect and just pumping the infect creatures. So the entire time was his creatures kept dying to the Scrivener's removal spells, but the other players creatures that he kept pulling out, he kept pumping them to get through to deal damage to the Scrivener. And sometimes it just works like that. Sometimes those other weird concepts that you have may or may not work depending on how the cooperative version of the format works. It's an entirely different beast, and it's really kind of fun to see what works and what doesn't.
I'd be interested to see how well my one deck Ashaya deck does. So my Ashaya mono green deck, it has 0 creatures, about 45 lands, and all it does is just animate all my lands and tries to swing and win. Like, I ramp as hard as I can and just have like 40 lands out. I animate them all and make them indestructible, and then just swing.
Wow, yeah, I would be really kind of curious to see how that deck would fare against some of the Scrivener spells, because we have some pretty nasty stuff in there. Like in our episode 1, when you get to scene 3, let's just say don't have too many lands out.
Oh no. Oh no.
So it's really kind of fun to see what people are doing and how their decks work with every different scene and journey and stuff like that. But one of the other things that I wanted to say, this goes back to a question you were asking about earlier of like, is there choice in a campaign for Wayfarer? And actually, yes. So in our original release, it's linear, but in Forgotten Realms, we wanted to have kind of more of that Dungeons and Dragons adventure aspect where when you go from one scene to the next, you can actually choose which scene you want to go into, and it'll change the outcome of the story by the time you get to the end of that episode. And that's kind of a way we wanted to introduce a little bit more of a player choice going on with that.
So in your D&D episodes, do you have any relevant dice rolling involved?
Absolutely.
I mean, besides the cards that already do the roll, roll a d20, this happens. Is there anything specific, like any of the players, like, oh, I need you to do a dice check, and you failed your athletics check or something?
Well, we of course want to make sure that the Magic gameplay is intact, right?
Yeah.
So try not to do things outside of what the cards do. So I don't think we'll be having like an athletics check or anything like that. But of course, we will have dice rolls that will fit as needed, and who knows, maybe some of the Scrivener cards will essentially replicate that effect of you need to make this dice roll, and on the card itself it'll say, like, if you've got 15 to 20, you succeed, and maybe this creature doesn't die because they leapt over the trap or something like that. It could happen.
Ooh, all right, here's an idea. All right, for D&D set, right? So you have you can do something simple instead of like doing strength, dexterity, con, and all that stuff. You do fortitude, reflex, and will. Sort of like the old school D&D, and your spark card could help you, depending on what kind of spark and commander you're playing. Like, oh, I get this spark, when I hit, what do you call it? The different episodes or whatever, you get a +1 to your fortitude roll or something, right? And then,
interesting.
And then the Scrivener, I don't know, does some sort of spell, and boom, you got to roll a fortitude saving throw, roll the dice, and if you fail it, then I don't know, you can't draw a card for a turn or something like that. I don't know.
Well, we typically try not to make mechanics that are downsides, and this is of course something that Wizards of the Coast does themselves, right? We take a lot of our philosophies from them, of course, from figuring out what works and what doesn't, and we have the interesting thing that we have, and this is also really cool too, is because if you're already coming up with ideas for stuff, then that means that we're doing something good, because we're inspiring you to make content for it. So we could do something similar to that, but like I said, we probably wouldn't do something that has a downside. Typically with our Spark emblems, we want to have it so the player feels like they're role playing as whatever they want to be. So for example, in our what we call our core set of Spark emblems, like one of them is like called Right, and it's all about like having the power over life and death. And for Forgotten Realms, we'll probably have like a wizard class, and that one will spawn the wizard class card from Adventures in the Forgotten Realms, but it'll also have its own level up system on it too that'll do different things, and it'll give you that kind of feel of like, yeah, I am playing this wizard, I do have these spells, they're going along with my commander, and it just makes it really fun.
That'd be cool. Yeah, I like that idea. So is it the plan to have new different kind of sparks for each set, or expand upon the core ones?
Okay, so with our initial release, we have what we call our core set of Spark Emblems. These are the ones
Hmm.
that are going to be available all the time. Granted, all the Spark Emblems are available all the time, but for every specific release, we're going to try to have at least maybe four, because typically there are four new Commander decks as well, but four new Spark Emblems that will go with it, so that way you can have that more custom feel to what is going on with your Wayfarer game that feels like you're on that plane. Like maybe if you want to play like somebody who's a planeswalker from Innistrad, and when we do the Innistrad release, maybe there might be a specific like artificer, like they mess with zombies and stuff like that, like what is it, Geralf or
Yeah, yeah,
Geralf.
yeah. Geese and Geralf,
Yeah, like that. Maybe we'll have that sort of Spark Emblem feel to it, or maybe we'll have
or like an
something that.
Arlen Cord one, do like
Mhm.
werewolf something.
Exactly, or something that's more feeling like it's vampires, where you're getting a lot of life, or you're, killing creatures off for your own benefit, right?
Interesting. I like that. Now I know with the way Wizards does their releases is you said just the premier sets, so that doesn't count the supplemental sets like the Masters, the Battle Bonds, the Conspiracies.
Correct. So, just as an essential guide, any specific release that has commander decks tied to it, there will be
Oh,
a
okay.
Wayfarer release that
Okay.
goes with it. So,
Okay. Okay, that makes
typically this
sense.
is going to be just standard decks. I don't think Wizards is going to release commander decks for supplementals yet. They may,
Yeah,
but that gives us,
they
of
will. Don't
course, a
worry.
breather.
They will. Well, heck, and you guys picked a hell of a year to start too. Isn't this like one of the first times that we've had five standard sets in a single year? Because
Yeah.
and it's, I mean, yeah, you start out with Strixhaven, so it's not too bad. You're sort of emulating the
Mm.
four standard sets, but man, you're gonna have Innistrad come out in what, October, and then
September.
it's September. Holy shit.
Yeah. Yeah, we're well aware of what comes out when.
And then what's the second Innistrad set come out in November?
November, yeah.
Oh my, that's like
So,
no time at all. That's
yeah,
like
it's Innistrad Midnight
zero
Hunt
time.
in September and Innistrad Crimson Vow in November. And the cool thing about it for us is our Wayfarer release is actually going to cover both sets.
Yeah.
So we
Okay.
don't have to worry about making two different releases.
Yeah, because
The
that'd be
entire storyline
insane.
is going to go over both sets, which is perfectly fine because what we have planned for that, we're hoping, the cards that are released with it will just line up perfectly with what we've got going on. And it looks to be that way, just from some kind of hints that Wizards of the Coast have put out recently.
Oh man, I really hope as cool as it is to have like five standard sets, I hope next year it's just back to four, because it's especially this year. There's been so many freaking sets
Tons of
already.
content. Tons of
God,
content. Yeah, they've released a lot of stuff. I
I
definitely
can't
agree with
even
you.
keep up with it. Like I feel like I just opened up some Modern Horizons 2 stuff,
Hmm.
and I
Hmm.
haven't gotten any D&D stuff yet. I have to
Right.
wait a couple months.
Yeah,
Um,
that's the problem with Modern Horizons 2 is that typically that specific set would have been like a Masters or something like that,
yeah,
where it would have just been all reprints. But they decided to print new stuff
of
that goes
course.
into Modern and also Commander that people want to go after. So it doesn't feel like a regular Master set, and it feels like something people want to buy. And especially because it's got the fetch lands and tons of other cards that people have been wanting, Cabal Coffers, things like that.
Oh yeah.
That set was highly anticipated and highly regarded. Our giveaways for that were so heavily retweeted. I think we reached like 1,000 plus retweets and likes on
That's
our
crazy.
giveaways for that. It was absolutely nuts. But of course, having those giveaways right when that height of hype came out really helped with awareness of Wayfarer in general, and giving people the idea that, yeah, like, in addition to getting these sweet cards, hey, there's a sweet new way to play Magic, right?
No, that's awesome. It's awesome, man. That's just you guys got your work cut out for you. I mean, just in the content
Mhm.
developing part,
Right.
man. It's is there? I mean, I feel like you all wouldn't even have enough time, because it'd be cool for you all to go back and do like for other sets, like
Mhm.
Kaladesh, especially Tarkir, you know, even like the original Theros, Ravnica, Mirrodin, stuff like
Well,
that.
we're going to release content every time they release commander decks. That's a guarantee, is that we're going to have that stuff available. And the cool part is that, as we go forward, Wizards of the Coast is going to want to return to those planes to
Oh
give
yeah.
them commander decks to go with it. and we're going to be right there alongside it. And I really can't wait for in-paper events to happen, because I want to be there with the rest of the team if we can in full force, with just this whole setup that people can play with their newest cards. That kind of excitement of like, okay, I can play competitive, and then I can go over here and play like this whole story, and that would be really exciting for people to see and have happen.
So that brings up a question for return sets. So Innistrad, it being returned, when you're thinking about designing the Scrivener sets, is there any thought to using older Innistrad cards with it as well too, from Shadows and the OG Innistrad?
That is quite a question. And so one of the difficulties we had creating Strixhaven stuff is we only have one set
Yep.
on Arcavios, plus like the commander stuff, and that's it. We have to stretch that across 5 different episodes, which has been a bit of a challenge, but we've overcome it. We making sure that we have good enough custom cards that elaborate on what happens on Arcavios with Strixhaven has been really amazing to set up. We have, like, for example, we've expanded on the Auric, and we have short stories about the Auric that maybe weren't available from Wizards of the Coast, that are coming from our writer, that will come out, showing off the different characters that we created for it, and just building on that lore that may not have been really explored by Wizards of the Coast. And so going into Innistrad, yes, I will say that we will take that whole breadth and depth of all the Innistrad sets that have been released, and we can cherry pick the things that we want to put into those sets in addition to the new stuff. So that way there's a feel of the history of Innistrad is available through playing the Wayfarers
That'll
stuff.
be cool. That'll be cool. So every Scrivener deck will have Snapcaster Mage, and make sure you have Lightning Bolt. It'd be like, listen here, Wayfarer scrubs. You're going to get Bolt, Snap, Bolt, all right?
Yes, maybe that might happen on episode 5 of Innistrad, our Innistrad content. Maybe that might happen. You'll just have to deal with it. We're just gonna go straight full on constructed deck, and
Right.
just see how people get through it.
Right,
That would be incredible.
Then get Liliana the Veil. Just be like, get wrecked. And then can't forget the Cavernous Souls, and then make one of the episodes where there's just a lot of green creatures, like small green creatures, and then they just drop a crater hoof. Like, get wrecked.
Yeah, so and that actually leads to another interesting point, which is when we decide to put cards into our Scrivener's decks, we actually do look at prices of stuff, because we know that if players want to build these things themselves, they don't want to have to go out and buy like 100, 200 cards.
Oh yeah, especially
dollar
Liliana
cards.
and Snapcaster, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So when we build these things, we typically try to go for commons and uncommons. And the cool part about it is that even with commons and uncommons, we have ways to like buff them up. Like, for example, when you go into episode 3, it's the start of tier 3 content, and that actually, if you're playing a multiplayer, will give the Scrivener an emblem that makes all your creatures get +1/+1, just a straight anthem to make everything stronger. So it will give that feel of the content is getting harder, and you have to deal with maybe, like, in episode 5, these creatures are starting out as like a 2/1, but maybe they have +3/+3 in this episode that makes them a 5/4 already at the beginning. Yeah, so like you have to deal with that. And that's the cool part about it, is the Spark emblems grow in power too, so you don't have to worry about it as much. Your stuff grows in power as the Scrivener stuff grows in power.
So is it your Spark emblems level up when you finish an episode,
Correct.
essentially?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so the cool part about the tier system is that it always tells you what tier of Spark emblems you're playing with, and also lets you know how difficult the content is. So when you go from episode 1, which is tier 1, you go to episode 2, which is tier 2, and when you go there, you'll upgrade your Spark emblem from tier 1 to tier 2. And then we have another rule built in where maybe my Spark Emblem in Tier 1 wasn't that great. Maybe it wasn't doing things that were meshing well with my deck. Well, you can switch when you go from Tier 1 to Tier 2 to a different one that we have available. And that also happens as well in Tier 4. So that way, if you're still not feeling it after Tier 3, you could be like, let me switch back over to, Justice, and let me get the Judicator avatar creature that's like an angel,
Awesome. Awesome. One other thing, and this has always been a pain point for a lot of people in D&D, is how much prep is involved for a Scrivener?
That's actually a very good question. And the cool part about it is using the episode guide, all you really need to do is build those decks and get that stuff together, and you're good to go. Because we have written for all our episodes, for at least our KVOs, the story that happens with every single playthrough. So you could, and this is kind of recommended for the Scrivener to just look at the guide themselves and not maybe the players, so that way they wouldn't know what's happening ahead of
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
But yeah, all you have to do is bring that guide with you. Just take a look at it and say, okay, this is what scene is one is supposed to be about. You can read that out to the players. You can go even deeper if you want to. We've had episodes on Twitch where I've done like voiceover for some of the elder dragons, which has been quite amazing. Like Fibblethip shows up out of nowhere, which is
Yeah.
always hilarious. So we've got a lot of cool stuff going on.
Okay, awesome. So it sounds like overall not that much prep.
Not-
Obviously probably looking over the custom cards and
Right.
sort of understanding the basics of it, but you're not going to need, 5-6 hours of prep
No,
like right
definitely
before you
not.
play.
Yeah, and one of the cool things you could do too, and this is what some people do with Magic decks in general, is they kind of like some people I've heard of, I think Loading Ready Run does this, where they take random commander decks, they don't even look at it, and they just play it blindly, and then they figure out how the deck plays as they go on. You could kind of do that with the Scrivener. You could just take that deck, put it together, don't even look at our custom cards, and then just figure out what they do, because we give you enough time between turns to figure out what cards you want to play when it's your turn.
Okay. So, okay, that makes sense. So I think just from what I'm hearing from you, at least from a Scrivener's point of view, a lot of the learning curves is going to be, I guess, the turn structure for the Scrivener, because it is going to be different.
Sure.
The free cards that you can play, the Essence Land, and probably some of the new mechanics that you all have come up with. But overall, it doesn't seem too bad.
No, I would say it might be a little bit slow on the first playthrough, but I think just like a regular game of Magic, once you play like once or twice, you'll definitely get the hang of it. And you'll know, of course, like being the Scrivener, these are the only rules that you have to know. The players don't necessarily have to know what the Scrivener does, because they some of the stuff that the Scrivener does is uncounterable. So like the card draws are uninterruptible. You can't stop that. And we've built ways so that the Wayfarers don't have to worry about too much of what the turn structure is for the Scrivener. They just have to deal with the mechanics, deal with the cards that come out, play through the story, and have more of a casual fun about it.
So, all right. So I'm an asshole player, right? I'm pissed that Hull Breacher's banned. But I instead put, Notion Thief or something, or I'm gonna be the asshole that shows up with Nekasar, right? Just play nothing but wheels. How does that affect the Scrivener, where literally every single spell I have is nothing but wheels?
I mean, if you wield the Scrivener, that is entirely on you, because the Scrivener can play up to as many cards for free from their hand, and they don't have a discard.
Oh,
They
they
have no
don't have
hand
a discard.
size.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
they have a base hand size they draw up to, but they have no hand size. So they
Okay,
can
okay.
have up to 7 cards, and they can play whatever they want out of it. They just wouldn't draw any more cards until they're below that base hand size. Then they go back up.
I see what you mean. But what about when the Scrivener runs out of cards?
Okay, that's a very good question as well. And this is something that people might be interested in as well, in addition to the regular mechanics that you may have to go through to do the scene. Like, for example, earlier we talked about figuring out which beacon was the correct one. We have, in addition to that, the basic mechanics of kill or mill. So if you kill the Scrivener's life total, they die. They come back in the next scene with a revived life total. So maybe a specific number that's on the next scene. It'll tell you what it is. Or if you mill them out, they do have a relatively small deck. So if your deck can do mill, you can just mill them out. It'll have the same effect of where you'll win that scene. They'll go to the next scene with their life total back to whatever it's supposed to be, and then you just continue on from there.
Um, has there been any talk of sort of discouraging that type of play, like mill or discard or wheel strategies? Because it seems like that would, let's say, like you said, I'm the asshole player, right? I'm the stupid pub stomper that shows up at the GP, oh, you're playing your precon decks, I'm gonna Nekasar you all out. And you have two Wayfarers that are playing mill and wheels. Like, to me that almost kind of like kills the fun of it almost, where
Well, I mean, this is kind of similar to a Rule Zero, talk that you would have with the rest of the play group, which is basically, what are you bringing to the table, and are you going to try to do these very aggressive methods that are going to essentially go around the mechanics of Wayfarer? And that's kind of that conversation that you would definitely want to have with the rest of the play group, or even the Scrivener themselves. Like, if this person wants to do that sort of method, I would definitely talk them over with it. Maybe you might want to set up like a one-on-one with the Scrivener so that they can attempt this form of gameplay and get it out of their system before playing with other people, or what have you. But that's definitely a conversation that should be had.
There hasn't been any talks of. So I completely 100% agree with the Rule Zero thing, because that needs to happen regardless. There hasn't been any decision on discouraging that play or like banning it, anything like that, or
we haven't gotten too much data specifically on people playing those heavily discard wheel strategies, specifically because most people that are actually playing Wayfarer are playing it with either pre-constructed decks or homebrew decks that don't do it. And we don't have too many people playing on that high level that we would have to really worry about banning something like that. And that's just kind of the nature of the format. It naturally draws people that want to play more fair, that want to play with specific cards that maybe they don't get to anymore in their regular Commander games. And that's
totally,
kind of the draw.
yeah, totally understand. It's just, I think about the asshole player that shows up, say you go to an LGS and like, yeah, I want to introduce Wayfarer, then you get the F&M end boss who thinks they're God's gift to Magic and shows up with, I don't know, Sisay, what combo Sisay, or the Selesnya one or something.
Right. Okay, so in addition to that, if we wanted to also talk about alternate win conditions, or like basically ways to combo off on the table that can happen in a high-level EDH game, we have it built into the rules where if you win that specific way, you can't win that way the rest of the entire episode. So you can do it once, which will get you through a scene, but you can't do it again. So you can keep trying and like it won't happen. So we built a way so that if a player wants to be that way, they can, but it's not going to ruin the fun for the rest of the Wayfarers on the table. And, maybe after they win that way, the Scrivener starts just putting all their efforts to killing that one player. And, that's entirely their prerogative. They can put all those cards into attacking that player. Remember, the infuse mechanic is there as well. So the longer the game goes on, the Scrivener can just make their stuff bigger and bigger and attack that one specific player.
Interesting. As a Scrivener, without even really knowing any of the deck lists that get involved. So once again, I'm thinking of the asshole player that makes you discard everything, wheel it all. Sure. Do Scriveners have ways to get stuff back from their graveyard?
Absolutely.
If it's not exiled,
Absolutely, yeah. We've built in many specific ways for strategies that may work, where I'm going to exile this thing, or I'm going to put it into your graveyard, then I'm going to exile it so you can't get it. Certain cards that we have that are integral to the scenes have clauses on them that are like, if this card would be exiled, put it back on the battlefield, or if this card would be put into the graveyard, put it somewhere else. So replacement effects that essentially make it harder for people to do that sort of asshole response.
I know, it's the best way I can think of it. It's just, I'm trying to think of all the ways that someone would purposely try to fuck it up, because there will be people out there that will do it.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's if you want to kind of relate it to Dungeons and Dragons, there are people out there that try to min-max as much as possible,
and cheat.
Yeah.
I had to kick out a cheater in my game before. Like, out of all the fucking games to cheat in, like, why D&D? You don't win anything. I mean, I totally understand why someone would cheat in Magic, because it makes sense to me. Like, yeah, I'm gonna try to get the extra booster pack at the store or something, or I'm trying to get the extra money in the GP or something. But D&D, Come on.
Yeah.
There's no.
And that also kind of translates to Wayfarer too. It's kind of like there is real, like, the only thing you get out of playing Wayfarer is the cooperative fun with playing with your friends, finding out what's happening in the story, which is of course very compelling. We try to make sure that there's always kind of like a cliffhanger, there's interesting story hooks. Just the ability to see more of the world is always something that is very attractive to a lot of people. And having that kind of gameplay in our game is really just, I don't know, it's kind of like akin to that thing I saw on the internet a while back where it's like that whole meme where it was like, like you've cheated yourself, you're not playing the game anymore. There's nothing you can gain out of it.
Yeah, no, for real. I mean, yeah, so I totally get where you're coming from. It's people should play this with, they want to have a good time with each other,
Right.
cooperative feeling.
Right.
There's
Yeah.
no pressure to, especially in Commander, like, even though to me Commander is so relaxing, but when you do play that higher power Commander, there's always that pressure of, oh my gosh, I gotta make sure I don't, this person doesn't combo off and stuff like that, trying to stop people forming alliances and
Right.
backstabbing people and all that. So I can see where that would be a lot more relaxing. One other quick question, and I'm just thinking of the mind of an asshole player, is what about something like a knowledge pool lock where no one can play anything?
No one can play anything.
Look,
Um, I'd have to look up the rules interactions with that specifically because I think we do have some rules with Wayfarer that allow the Scrivener to still cast stuff through the knowledge pool, but I'd have to look that up. I don't know that knowledge offhand, but I think even if that would happen, we might do like a banning of knowledge pool or something like that. And I haven't seen that yet, but we're on the lookout for it. If interactions like that make it difficult to play the game.
oh yeah, I'm trying to think of anything else. I can't think of anything else. Yeah, because the only other cards that really come to mind would be something like Ward of Bones. Because would your Scrivener be considered an opponent?
So yeah, so
okay.
the Scrivener is the opponent. So just like in an archenemy game, any sort of opponent cards will work on them.
Okay.
And all of your Wayfarers are teammates in the rules.
Okay, because I'd be curious to see what your guys' thoughts are. Ward of Bones and Dampening Engine, where essentially those cards don't allow your opponent to play something. Like Ward of Bones is, your opponent can't play lands if they have more lands than you. They cannot play creatures if they have more creatures than you, etc. Stuff like that.
Right. So just at the initial reading of that, when you get essence lands, you're actually creating them, so that gets around that because you're not actually playing them, you're creating them. You're creating a copy of them essentially. And the creature part, I don't think it's too much of a big deal. During the Wayfarer games, we haven't ever gotten to the point where there's just a bajillion amount of creatures out. There are built into the Scrivener's decks themselves board wipes and removal and things like that will target those other creatures, and it's typically on a higher level than other Commander games that may not have as much interaction.
Okay, interesting. One other question, another rules question: are the Wayfarers themselves considered separate players as well, just like you would in like a typical archenemy game or even two-headed giant?
Yes, so if you're referring to if, like, maybe, for example, in Adventures in the Forgotten Realms, if somebody would go into a dungeon, do they all go into a dungeon? No, each player can have their own dungeon. So,
Okay.
yeah, it works just like that.
Okay, cool. Just curious on that. Trying to think of any other rules-based questions or anything like that. I can't think of anything. Has there been anything? I guess in term. Well, have you all mainly just been playing pre-con decks, or has there been? Have you guys tried higher powered EDH decks to see how well it does, just for playtest purposes, or?
So we've had people play with some of the high-powered stuff, and they've basically come away saying that, yeah, I can basically power through stuff pretty easily, which is entirely fine. If you want to power through that stuff with a higher power deck, that's totally fine. But if you're going to play with a multiplayer group, I would definitely recommend, talking to the group and seeing how things are working, having that discussion and seeing what's going on. But for the most part, all of our playtesters are more than happy with playing with pre-constructed decks or homebrew decks that are on the same level. Especially that we've seen as a trend is for the specific releases, people are actually very interested in playing with the commander decks that release with that specific release
Mm-hmm.
and being on theme, as it were. So, for example, on our Twitch streams that I've been having every week, one of our players, Finnegan, has been playing Osgear, who is, of course, one of the commanders from Strixhaven, just to be kind of on theme. And, that's kind of something we're shooting for, and it's really kind of cool to see people take that into account.
Okay. When you, oh shoot, what was I gonna ask? Um, wow, I completely blanked out there. So yeah, the precon decks, certain power. Oh yeah, that's right. So in your playtesting that you've done, what do you consider? Even though it's made for precon decks, I'm just thinking of players who don't want to play precons or anything. What have you guys thought of? What is how do you determine if a deck that you have is too strong that's just going to make everything too easy? Like, have you guys thought about that power level? Like, I hate to use the word power levels because it's so subjective there, but at least for
Right.
this it seems like you be able to gauge it a little bit better since the scrivener knows exactly what's in each deck and all that.
hmm hmm So, no, that's a very good question. And I would say, and this is something that we don't have as a hard and fast rule. We don't have any specific guidelines for it, and maybe we will, as the game gets bigger and more people ask about it, like yourself. But any sort of deck that has a lot of combos that they can just combo out and win the game, that might be a little bit too strong for a Wayfarer game because maybe you'll win through Thassa's Oracle and you'll go to the next scene from there, and then maybe the next one from there might be some sort of other alternate win con or infinite damage to the Scrivener or something like that. And, you know, those decks are a little bit too strong for Wayfarer, and I would say maybe don't play those. Now, for example, we've built in some rules where you can only win once that specific way. So you can only Thassa's Oracle once. You can't just keep repeating it after every scene. Um,
But if they have
but
something like Lab Man and then the Jace one
right.
two and
Right. Yeah, they could do it multiple times in
yeah.
from different cards. Yes. So I would say maybe don't play that there unless you want to like go through the story as fast as possible, which I mean, like I said before, is entirely up to you. And if that's how you want to play it, we're not going to dissuade that. It's just being respectful of the other people who are playing that maybe want to play with their own deck might be a conversation you want to have.
Oh, totally understand. Understand. Oh, another quick question about Thassa's Oracle here.
Sure.
All right. So you say that someone can't do it in the next episode. Is that only for that specific player? Let's say 3 players all bring Thassa's Oracles because they're all assholes, right?
Right. Well, I mean, that specific player, the way that we have the rules written right now, that specific player cannot win with that specific combo
So the
for
other
the
two
rest of the
can do
episode.
it for the
The
next.
other two could do it. Yeah, so if you want to like speed mode through an episode and have everybody run the same deck, more power to you. Like this is entirely if you want to skip all the mechanics, go for it, and see how far you get. Because I mean, sometimes in some of our episodes you can't win through those mechanics
Yeah.
or like the scenes themselves will have on it saying like you can't mill the Scrivener or something like that. So we built some of those kind of ways that force the player to play the mechanics, and some people might like that, some people might not.
Oh, interesting. No, it's not that I would ever suggest that way of play. It's just I'm trying to think of every single type of
I love
Magic
it.
player that would just because there'd be people that are going to do it.
And I hope for my responses that it at least looks like that we've done some thinking on this.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Oh, there is another type of card that I'm curious. What about can't lose or can't win cards?
Very interesting. So of course, those cards, while they're on the battlefield, they do as they intend, which is I mean, the Scrivener never is supposed to win, just like the Dungeon Master is never supposed to kill the
Yeah,
party group. I mean,
but it
it
happens.
happens,
Yeah.
it happens, but especially in Magic, uh, there's a kind of and this is what Wizards of the Coast also does themselves. They want to always minimize feel bads as much as possible. It happens with all their design now, where you can even see with the latest Forgotten Realms, they put up a design blog where they talked about the roll mechanic. They could have done a thing where rolling was giving much more variance, and then they had the bright idea of like, oh, what if we give you the base effect, and then we give you a roll that gives you an additional effect, and then it doesn't feel
Yeah.
as bad if you roll something bad. And that's kind of what we do in Wayfarer as well. We make the mechanics strong, but we don't make it so that it's overwhelming for the player. This is something we had to get used to when we developed the first episode, which was where most of our design paradigms came from. Where we had that second scene I was telling you about, where the player was on fire. We had it so that it kept exponentially getting higher, and eventually the players were taking like 12 damage a turn.
Oh
Like
shit.
there's no way they could stop it. Yeah, it was absolutely crazy, and we had to put a limit on it. We had to change how things like that work. Now it's challenging, but it's not overwhelming, and that's some of the things that you have to take into account when you're making Wayfarer stuff.
Okay. So, all right. So basically, you all try to design mechanics to still have the Scrivener be able to do something, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Because
Hmm.
just like in a normal EDH game, if you lock everyone out, it's pretty much not fun.
Right. Exactly. We try to minimize the way that unfunness happens in the game, and it being
Oh
a
yeah.
casual format, we don't foresee too many people just trying to spike it, as it were. I mean,
Yet. Yeah,
we
because a lot of
right.
people play casual EDH and then they're like,
Mm,
I'm gonna drop my, casual Gaia's Cradle with, Thespian Stage and Merit Lage and, play 50 lands a turn. Like, that doesn't
right.
seem pretty casual to me.
Casual to them, of
Yeah,
course, is
right?
not going as hard as they normally do. Yeah, I get it. Yeah, and there's different, and of course, it's all subjective to different people, and that's of course right back to that conversation that you should always have.
No, I like that. I like that. I feel like, just from what I'm hearing, it sounds like, at least me, I would only want to play this with precons,
Hmm.
essentially.
Hmm.
Maybe a slightly upgraded precon, like
Sure,
nothing
you can
too
do that too.
crazy. Um,
Yeah.
but no, it sounds interesting. It sounds fun. It sort of does scratch that D&D itch because I've been designing two D&D cubes to really be played more traditional Magic like. I've
Mm.
got a player's cube which has like all 9 D&D classes in it that you can sort
Ooh,
of draft together, and then I have a monsters cube which
cool.
only one or two people should draft, that like either do an arch enemy style or like a two-headed giant style. And essentially it's the monster cube is technically stronger than
Hmm.
the player's cube, but the player's cube there should always be at least 2 to 3 players against the monster's cube, but it's played in an arch enemy style though. It's not no special mechanics or anything like that. So that to what you're describing sort of scratches that role playing itch of fusing, D&D and Magic together.
Right. Yeah, and one of the biggest things we wanted to have with it is, like I said before, is that kind of feel where, you know, as Commander continues to grow and there's more cards released it and the format continues to get faster and faster, or more cards continue to get pushed out, where people may kind of yearn for those days of Commander 2014 or various, decks that they put together then. This gives them a way to bring those decks back out. Pull that deck back out that has like, some more battle cruiser stuff in it, stuff that's like 6, 8 mana, stuff like that. You're allowed to play that in Wayfarer. It will do things to help you progress in the
Right?
scene. You get to play with that big let's say like the what is it, the Parhelion from War of the Spark, right? The
Yeah,
like eight
yeah.
mana artifact. You get to play with that if you want to.
God.
That will still
Yeah.
work here.
No, man, that makes me miss like some it makes me miss some of the old school Commander, because I I still love Commander. I love that it's more popular than ever, and I just hate that even playing casually, you still feel like you need to build your decks a lot stronger than what they used to be. It's like,
Gotta have that dockside distortionist.
I know, right? And it's like, oh, that's totally casual. And it's like,
Yeah, this is the casualest
is
card
it?
ever, dockside distortionist, right?
Is it
Just
though?
spend $60 and put it in your deck, right?
Right? And there's some people out there. It's like, oh, I don't play competitive EDH, and it's like, okay, so you just like turn one, combo off or something. Like,
Right,
what
where
is this, Legacy Storm?
they'll turn one, put out Najila with Jeweled Lotus, right? They're like, this is my casual EDH deck. This isn't my try hard deck. And you're like, wow,
Yeah,
okay,
sure,
I'm
sure.
about to get comboed out here.
Right?
So we've got that fit in Wayfarer, where if you've got that lower powered deck that you've wanted to play with those commanders that you really enjoy, it's there for you. And just like you said before, Commander is only getting more popular. It's the most played format of Magic in general. Most people that get into Magic now are playing Commander first, which is why they
Which
continue to
is
make those
crazy.
Commanders decks. Yeah, it's wild, isn't it?
It's as great as Commander is. I still feel like that is not a good format to start in. And I just mean, like, I feel like Standard and Booster Draft are a lot better entryways into Magic, because you start off with generally a lot lower powered cards, and I feel like you understand a lot more of the mechanics of the game before diving in Commander, because you get your friend into Commander, and they get a precon you don't have, when you're like, oh, I've
Right.
got my $2,000 deck that has all these cards from 20 years of Magic. That's going to be too overwhelming for them.
Right, yeah, it's definitely going to be kind of overwhelming for them. And uh, like I said, that's why I really do feel like, especially starting up now with Wayfarer, is providing a way that people can now. And of course, people, and I've seen people start up with, like, there's like a commander, old school commander format that people are putting together where you play with those older cards, but having a way that feels less intimidating, like you were referring to,
Hmm.
because you have to keep up with how Commander is right now. Having a way that you can just kind of bring whatever you want to the table, experience the story, play with the cards you feel are personally flavorful or central to how you like to play the game, and not really having to worry about, well, do I have to counter this stuff? Am I playing enough
Yeah, yeah.
interaction? Am I doing all these things that are making me feel like I can do something in the game, and not having to worry about mana screw or anything like that. Like, this is a way for us to be able to serve not only that group of people that want to play that way, but also people that are intimidated playing competitive style, right?
Exactly. How many players? How many Wayfarers can there be?
So we built the format to be single player, so you can play it yourself, just by yourself, playing the commander deck and the scrivener at the same time if you want to.
Okay.
You can also be the scrivener yourself and then have one other person, and then you can go up to three wayfarers that you're playing with while you're playing as the scrivener. So four total, just like any regular
Okay.
commander pod nowadays. And we wanted to make sure that that was translatable easily to that format.
Now, does it sort of start to unbalance things if you go above 3 players?
It does a little bit. I will definitely agree there that that will happen. However, we have built in to the format a scaling mechanic. So almost every single time something happens in the game, it will say for each Wayfarer. So that way, if there are more than three, it will always try to balance itself based on how many there are. And
Okay.
we really don't recommend going past three because the games will take way too long if you do so.
So what is an average game like? So you mentioned like different episodes, different scenes. So is it you just so let's say I get together with my friends, we want to play Wayfarer for the night.
Mhm.
Would we just play one episode? Like, is that going to be enough to satisfy that game, that night of gaming, or do we need to go through all 5 episodes?
So we built Wayfarer to be a essentially kind of similar to a Dungeons and Dragons session where you get together, you want to play through the story. It's probably going to take you anywhere from 2 to 4 hours to play through the entire episode, because each
And that's
episode
just
has
one
four
episode,
scenes.
right?
Yep, that's just
Okay.
one episode. So we built it that way so you have, if you want to get your play group together and be like, okay, let's go through this whole journey together. This week we'll play episode 1, we'll try to beat it, and then next week we'll play episode 2. And you have that kind of setup that's akin to Dungeons and Dragons where you're feeling like you're moving through a story all together.
Okay.
And if you don't want to play through the story, if it's harder to get people together, that's totally fine. And of course, if it's still even harder to be physically together, we got that tabletop simulator mod. Get your
Yep.
get your friends together and get in there. So that'll be great.
Okay. Okay. And is it recommended if you and your friends play to finish an episode every time you play, or is it okay to do a few scenes and then stop there, then pick it up?
Yeah, absolutely. It is totally fine to do a few scenes and stop there and pick it up later. This is something that hasn't been actually asked too much, but just even thinking on it, the way the scenes are set up, you could literally just start, let's say, on scene 3, which would probably be like maybe like an hour or 2 hours into the episode. You could just start on scene 3, have every player start with like say 4 or 5 lands out, and just go from there. And it would totally be fine to jump into the if the scrivener has no lands or creatures out at all anyway at that point, then it's not really much of a big deal, and you can just continue on as normal.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. I like that. So it does sound like a D&D type session where just pick up and come back to where you're at. I like that.
Yeah, with magic cards.
Yeah. No. So God, it's just so much information being processed right now with it. It sounds really interesting. I really hope that you get together with Ted and we try to work something out here with some of the other cards for your folks, because I am interested in playing. I do have a few pre-con decks. I've got the Strixhaven Isn't one, and then I have some of the Ikoria ones as well too.
Safai, yeah, cool, very cool. Yeah, I'm sure you probably have Gavin or Gavi. I'm sorry, or some of the other ones like Trimi, I think maybe is from Ikoria as well.
I've got
Yeah.
the only one that I have put together that's still, I'd say, a slightly upgraded precon is Cathrall.
Okay.
The,
Yeah,
the one
yeah.
that has all the counters and all that.
Ooh,
The
that would be quite
lifelink, the
interesting.
indestructible counter. It's the only upgrades I did was I added the Triome, I added
Mhm,
Emergent Ultimatum,
mhm.
and God, I can't remember what else. It wasn't like a whole lot. Like I barely
Right.
changed the deck.
Well, that would be kind of interesting to play, I think, if you would play with the counters one. Um, you might want to play with our core set Spark Emblem, which is called Courage, which that Spark Emblem is entirely about bringing out this specific creature, because they all bring out avatar creatures that do different things. And Courage is called, I think it's like the Intimidator, and it will always have its power equal to whatever creatures are attacking. So, like, if the Scrivener's attacking you, its power will go up. If you're attacking with creatures, its power will go up. But the Courage ability on the Spark Emblem itself, not on the creature that it creates, is kind of what we built similar to like any other game that has like tanks in it, where it taunts creatures. So
Mm-hmm.
it will choose a creature that the Scrivener has, and that creature must attack you that turn. Which, of course, you can use your avatar to block with because it gets bigger based on things attacking you, or you can use your other creatures, and that might be really fun to use.
Ooh, that could be cool. Get my Cathrall where it has indestructible, double strike,
Mhm.
hexproof, vigilance,
Yeah,
haste.
yeah. So it could be
Something
it could
like,
be a prime blocker. Yeah.
right? Yeah, I like that. Um, has there been one last question, and then I've got something for you?
Sure.
Um, has there been any thoughts to how these sort of games interact with a lot of the older mechanics of Magic?
Ooh.
Like you got banding, rampage, phasing. Um, I'm talking like some of the old shit, like
Oh yeah.
the landwalk stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Landwalk is going to be kind of interesting because Essence lands don't count as any land type, so
yes,
that might be a problem.
and then just like a lot of those old mechanics there that I'm sure there's way more that I just can't think of.
Well, I mean, if they ever go back to like Olgrotha or something and have commander decks there, I'm sure we could put in some really crazy mechanics from the Homeland set or something.
Right?
So
Hey,
we're always kind of on the lookout for what works in our journeys and the cards that we create custom, right? And so sometimes we'll have cool stuff like Rampage in there, or we are also using phasing. As Wizards of the Coast is also using for some of their abilities.
yeah,
And we've
because
got cards that do that too.
it's starting to slowly come back. I've noticed. Hell, even Storm came back in Modern Horizons too. Like, what the? I thought we'd never see Storm again.
I think we have a Storm card in one of our episodes now that you mention it.
Yeah, it's like I thought Mark Rosewater said like, no, we'll never use Storm again. Oh, apparently not.
One of the cool things that we also do with our journeys is we design, so most of the cards are literally unable to be used outside of Wayfarer. And the cool part is we've got them all with the Wayfarer watermark. So that way at a glance this card is a Wayfarer card, right? It's got the logo on it. But sometimes what we do is we want to give a little bit more of excitement to the players playing Wayfarer. Sometimes we make specific commanders that don't have Wayfarer rules on them that if your playgroup's okay with it, you can take that card out. Maybe it's like a crucial new character that we've come up for the plot that you want to play with because you're such a fan of Wayfarer, and you can talk to people about it. And we've got one of those cards already.
That'd be cool. Before we start wrapping things up here, it's gonna be almost 2 hours like soon. I can't believe it. The is there anything I didn't think to ask that you want to mention? Anything about Wayfarer? Because I tried to ask as much as I could
No, you did a really good
to
job.
at least get the listeners, even myself, because watching that intro video and just reading a little bit on the website, it just still have so many questions, right? Because
Sure.
I mean, it's a new format and it's extremely different way to play Magic, at least for the Scrivener, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So, is there anything that you want to mention that I didn't bring up or that you can think of?
Well, I think one of the things that we did not go over in terms of just in general info over the game itself or the format itself were the spoils deck, the item cards that you can get.
Oh, I
Which
forgot
is
all about that. Yeah.
yeah, it's a total new mechanic to the game. It's not super crucial to the game. It brings an additional flavor feel to the world itself and makes you feel like you're kind of there because the items typically will be kind of flavored to whatever is going on that plane of existence. And so for the base set, we've got and the spoils deck, just to explain to the listeners, is a deck that the Scrivener has next to them. That's 20 cards. It's all shuffled up before the game starts. And the Scrivener will have that, and then the Wayfarers will trigger an action called Loot the Spoils, which is kind of like venture into the dungeon. It's a phrase that will do something. And so looting the spoils is taking the top card off the spoils deck and casting it. It's typically right now in the core set an item artifact, which is it has a new super type called item, and that super type item means essentially it's kind of like a legendary card. We wanted to make it kind of like legendary, but not with the word legendary because having every item be legendary seems kind of redundant. So making it an item means that all the Wayfarers can choose who gets control of it when you've cast it. So that way, if a certain person needs this, they can get that item. But like legendary creatures or any other legendary permanent, you can only have one of them out. And if you loot the spoils, say, twice, and you get something like the collaborative curative or black blade origin, right, you have to pick between one of those two that you want to keep and determine, like, will I get better use out of, say, a potion versus having this cool sword. And that gives an extra little gameplay layer that can assist you in combat versus the Scrivener.
Awesome. So I mean, sort of like just finding loot, finding treasure, like in a dungeon. I like that.
Correct.
That's
exactly,
pretty cool.
Yeah.
Is there anything else I missed, or?
I do believe that was the only thing that we did not talk about. We've talked about all the Scrivener rules, and we've talked about what the Scrivener does. Yeah, that's basically it.
Awesome. So I know that you guys are all on Twitter, and you stream. What is it? Once a week? You try to stream.
Yeah, we typically try to do Thursdays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That will be our playthroughs of our different episodes. future streams beyond Thursday will of course be arranged based on whoever else that we can get available to play. Like for example, our first major stream we had was on a Monday with Mana Curves and Jake and Joel are MTG, and they were able to play that, and that was extremely popular. People really enjoyed watching that. So yeah, whoever we can get available to us, we'll always set those out, and we'll announce when those streams will happen, in addition to our giveaways and things like that go on.
Awesome. Well, count me interested in it, and I definitely want to try it out. So is there any other place on social media where people can find you, like Instagram, Facebook, Reddit, TikTok, wherever else?
Okay, so just to go down the list, specifically for me, being Ashodin, you can find me at Riptide Pro Lab. That's my main Twitter account that I do all of my personal tweeting from. This was, of course, my main account when I was running the Riptide Project Laboratory. I've switched entirely over to Wayfarer development because it's something that I really want to do, and thrown myself fully into. But for Wayfarer itself, you can go to mtgwayfarer.medium.com for the articles that we'll have. It always has our announcements of future content, the release articles for every episode that release, which gives you the guides, the images, more. You can, of course, go to our Discord, which is in our Twitter bio, which our Twitter account for the Wayfarer Guild is, of course, at the Wayfarer Guild. On Twitter, and then various permutations of that you can find on Instagram at Wayfarer Guild. You can find us twitch.tv.com/the Wayfarer Guild. Any other place you can think of to find social media, we're there. And then, of course, we have our own subreddit, which is reddit.com/r/mtg Wayfarer, and you can go there and see all the spoilers we have for upcoming content, other various cool things you can talk about with the Wayfarer community there as well.
Awesome. Well, all those links will definitely be in the show notes below, just so people can easily access it. Thank you so much for coming on and just chatting with me about Wayfarer here. It sounds like a very ambitious and very interesting format. And I hope you all have nothing but success. And because I'd like to see another format succeed like this, right? It's not that Commander, Modern, Legacy, and all of them are bad or anything. It's just that's one of my favorite things with Magic is there's just so many different ways to play it. And I think that's why it's kept the longevity as long as it has, because there's people like yourself and your whole team that are trying to develop something that, it has potential, I think.
Right.
It's just getting the word out.
Yeah, and that's another thing that I think really sets us apart from other people coming up with other formats, that are just competitive. It's a cooperative format, and that's the biggest strength that we have that sets us apart from everyone else.
Oh, definitely. No, it's interesting. All right. Well, thank you again, Ashton, for coming on. I really appreciate it. Like I said, listeners, all the links will be in the show notes below. Thank you again, and I hope you have a great night. All right.
All right. Great. Thank you.
Hey, everybody. Thank you all for listening and watching there. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Wayfarer sounds very, very interesting. I want to hear your thoughts on it as well too. Send them either below in the comments or shoot me an email or let me know on social media somewhere, because it sounds very promising and it sounds interesting. It sounds like there's a lot of, I wouldn't say a huge learning curve for the Scrivener player. It sounds like there's a bit of a learning curve, but at least for players that you're trying to get interested in it, they just come with a pre-con commander deck or a lower powered commander deck and then just play from there. And there's nothing else they have to know. So thank you again, Ashton, for coming on the show, and really appreciate talking about it wow. I hope I picked your brain like crazy, and hope you didn't mind me asking all the questions there. But I enjoyed it, and I hope you all enjoyed it as well too, and hope you all have a great night. All right.